We are now presenting the ideology of inaction, political psychology of resilience in the Philippines. Thank you all for attending this Congress and our panel. So, for your presenters, may I introduce us? Uh, I am Matt Ordonez from the Political Science Department. Is with me is my colleague, also from the Political Science Department, Anthony Borja. Woo!
Eh,
So yeah, so we are both, well, because it's difficult to have a Zoom recording, and affects our bandwidth. We decided to simply just put ourselves in animated form, thanks to Anthony over here. So yeah, I'm the one on the left, and he's the one on the right. So just so say hello.
Hello.
Okay, so let's proceed. So, what are we dealing with here? So, we're talking about resilience, and resilience became a key word in the media, especially last year in the wake of Typhoon Ulysses. And the thing, of course, this began with when people were asking about the relief and response teams or disaster response teams with Secretary Harry Roque. And he said that, despite not being able to accommodate everyone, he said that the Filipino people are resilient and can survive and manage. Now, this, of course, outraged certain netizens and caused them to react, saying that, what, well, and as a result, why aren't as many people as outraged as the netizens? A lot of prominent netizens were, but not everyone. So, of course, um, this is this is an initial discourse that has emerged a long time ago. But usually, that happens here in the Philippines because of all the typhoons and uh, and calamities that happen on a regular basis. But what does it mean when we are resilient? Are we really resilient? And as political scientists, we focus on the lack of accountability, the lack of criticism, and the lack of, not the complete lack, but the majority of people do not get inspired to participate or to political action, to political critique, to fight for political reform. That's what we've noticed, and so that's in a way in common with the word resilience. When you say resilience, it's usually a word used for inanimate objects, which can return to its original shape after applied pressure. For people, for human beings, it is people who can withstand stress, pain, and suffering. And this is, while this is admirable to an extent, the fact that it has not inspired political backlash or dissent is concerning. And so that is what we're going to do today. Our main question is, do mainstream political ideology why are mainstream political ideologies unable to inspire political action among Filipino citizens? Because that's the weird thing. Most of our mainstream ideologies are in the form of like are embodied by political parties like the Liberal Party, liberalism, and prominently the Makabayan Bloc, Bayan Muna, Akbayan, um, and the like, which represent Marxist and progressive ideas. However, while they are currently in government, they do not inspire political action from this in for the majority of people. The majority of people simply choose not to participate. So why is that the case? Initially, that is how we approach resilience. For us, we frame resilience as a product of an ideology of inaction and coping in the face of discontent. So again, rather than respond and express backlash against the government, critiquing the government, people simply remain inactive and they decide to cope either through their families or their communities, but they don't express it in the public sphere. And so here's our related literature. So right now, in the discipline of political science, patron-client relations is the dominant mover in politics. What do you mean by patron-client relations? It's usually through an exchange of goods. So politicians provide goods, and people, the citizens, like vote for them in exchange, or they provide their an exchange. So it's usually a transactional. Politics is merely transactional for most uh, for most political activities, especially most prominently in elections. However, as a result, ideology seems to take the back seat when regards to explaining political phenomenon. But for the most part, ideology comes from political parties, policymakers, philosophers, intellectuals, and according to philosophers like Slavoj Žižek, sometimes by capitalism itself. We adopt Frieden's definition of ideology, which is shared concepts and visions of reality and ideal futures. And while me and my my co-author focuses on ideology, not in the traditional sense, but it's still coming from the people. What people believe in common, it's from the bottom up in the grassroots, and so this includes the idea of resilience adapted into the concept of disaster management. And at this point, I'd like to pass the baton to my co-author, Mr. Anthony Borja.
That is the current condition right now of the literature on resilience. For the most part, it has been used in the context of governance. Now, in a nutshell, resilient governance or resilience governance is about adaptation. Okay, and this is applied to, of course, government units, organizations, and entire societies and their capacity to absorb and to an extent adapt to disasters. But there is a gap in relation to political psychology. Resilience as a political value hasn't been thoroughly examined, and this is what we are trying to do now in and through the notion of ideology as a set of shared concepts, visions of reality, and an ideal future. So again, we would try to examine the values of Filipinos and, of course, their subsequent behavior. There are no direct measurements for resilience at this point, and we are trying to break ground. But there are, of course, measurements that can be used to, more or less, to analyze what we refer to as the root of resilience, which is political alienation. Now, political alienation and inaction are closely related, but in a nutshell, political alienation refers to a sense of separation from a political object, may it be specific politicians or the government in general. And it also leads to a sense of powerlessness, or this perceived inability to control an object, which in turn eventually leads to behavioral conditions, behavioral tendencies, specifically to political inaction that can solidify into habits through time. Now, for the Philippines, and this data, just to give you an overview, came from the Asia Barometer surveys, waves 2 until 4, conducted between 2005 to 2014 by SWS4 Asia Barometer Project. It shows that Filipinos are estranged from the government, and they don't see the government as someone who can respond to their demands outside elections. And as far as I'm concerned, political alienation is not only about looking out, but looking back. Filipinos don't see themselves, most Filipinos don't see themselves as capable of influencing government, even if they are free to speak, even if they are free to organize. Now, this is the problem that had been sustained and had been, to an extent, ignored by most of the literature in Philippine politics. But the issue on resilience, this had been trumpeted for decades, since the Philippines is basically a doormat for typhoons. Every time there's a typhoon, resilience, the discourse of resilience is always brought up. And alongside it, even if the government is incapable, even if the government cannot provide goods, even if they slap their faces on relief goods, Filipinos may express criticism, but they will not participate in political activism. So their expressions of discontent are limited to their own circles without participating in public affairs. And this is the data from the third and fourth wave, showing that outside elections, Filipinos are generally inactive. Now, what should we say from this one? Well, first and foremost, resilience is more than what is discussed in mass and social media. As a discursive mechanism, resilience should be considered not only as a pathology, but as a means for us to understand sustained political alienation in the Philippines.
And while we know that, as according to the data, even before the current discourse on resilience, that Filipinos do not participate, and it's because of a certain feeling of alienation. There is still a lot we do not know, and that we still need more studies that look into cultural and social psychological patterns. This merely scratch the surface, but hopefully this is the start of an ongoing conversation that hopefully you will join us in. So thank you very much for listening. We're happy to be here in this Arts Congress.
Again,
Thank
thank you,
you.
and here are our references. Thank you, and have a good day.